Then, distinguished delegates, faculty advisors, and guests, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on from where you are joining us for this closing ceremony of the 2021 NMUN New York Virtual Conference. Again, my name is Michael Eaton, and I serve as Executive Director of the National Model UN. On behalf of the board and secretariat, thank you for your hard work this week, and congratulations on your accomplishments as individuals committed to making a difference as global citizens. At the opening ceremony, Ambassador De Laurentiis offered you 6 tips for success at the UN. Having observed several committee sessions, I am convinced that you heeded his advice. Indeed, I witnessed how you knew the briefing materials you had researched. More challenging, perhaps, was how to virtually forge new relationships, as he encouraged, with your fellow diplomats and future leaders. I believe the past few days have validated the efforts of the Secretariat, working with Gatherly to create a conference that felt cohesive by using huddles that created some of the one-on-one conversations that allow you to find what you might have in common with someone from a different country. I am incredibly proud that more than one member of the actual UN Secretariat that visited the simulation commented on how NMUN Online could be a model for the UN itself. 2021 marks 94 years since the first Model League of Nations to which we trace our roots. The NMUN Board of Directors is responsible for the long-term educational quality of the National Model United Nations. We are a nonprofit corporation with official NGO status at the UN. At this time, I would like to invite board member and chair of the NMUN Program Committee, Professor Tina Zappilli, to the broadcast for her remarks.
Hello and welcome everyone to the closing ceremony. On behalf of the NMUN Board of Directors, I am thrilled to speak for a few moments at the end of the second virtual NMUN conference. We want to thank especially Michael, Paul, and Jess for their tireless efforts throughout the entire last year to pivot this organization towards your experience here this week. And together with the leadership of Alfie and Marleen, our professional staff demonstrated their commitment to professionalism and a commitment to delivering a high quality experience for all of you. So we applaud their efforts. And to the delegates, today and during this closing ceremony, all of your hard work came to fruition in the form of resolutions that address many of the serious and complex issues we all face today. Over the last several days, I hope that you've learned how challenging and difficult diplomacy can be, and also why it's so important. Imagine if the countries you represented this week could not be at the table when discussing the issues at hand. And I'm sure this came up at the Security Council more than once. But more broadly, I want to remind you of the function of the UN and the ability for people to have a seat at the table to discuss issues that their citizens care so deeply about. I also hope that you were able to reflect over the last few days and see your successes, for which you should be very proud. But I want to remind you of the words of our opening speaker, that I wish for you that you have the humility to recognize your mistakes and see where you could have done things differently, maybe just one thing. And this is not to shame yourself, but rather in the spirit of learning more about yourself, your strengths and your weaknesses. That's also what NMUN is about. Self-awareness and humility are valuable skills that you can take with you anywhere you go after this conference. And those skills will serve you well in whatever careers you choose. Finally, the opportunity to listen to people and really hear and understand their positions is a key benefit of the UN and the NMUN conference experience, but only if delegates take it upon themselves to do so. In the documentary, The Fog of War, Robert McNamara famously identified lesson number 1 as empathize with your enemy. In the film, he focuses in on the Cuban Missile Crisis and the inability for General Curtis LeMay to have empathy and understanding of the Soviet Union's position. But at the end of the film, McNamara reflects on the Vietnam War and lamented the inability for US President Johnson to listen to and understand the Vietnamese position, suggesting that was a major factor in the outcome of the war and the prolonged involvement of the United States. Of course, there is more than one person's truth about any event, let alone a complex event like the Vietnam War, but he has an important point, and the human cost was very real. But make no mistake, listening and empathy do not require you to agree to or condone behaviors that violate your principles and values, and the principles of the international system in the case of the UN and your experience here this week at the conference. You can still listen and empathize with other positions and take a hard line or a soft line on not accepting behaviors of other countries when they do violate those values and principles. That might mean in practice, upholding our International Bill of Human Rights, or perhaps defending the more controversial idea that intellectual property for vaccines might be a global public good. It might also mean acting as an advocate for others who don't have the same power or vote or voice, even when, and especially when, it's inconvenient and uncomfortable for you to do so. So whatever your values or positions are, you need to know them in order to defend them and advocate for them. And our opening speaker reminded you of this when he described some of the skill set of the most successful diplomats, that they knew their stuff. And I hope this week that you learned something about your own values, not just about the positions of the countries that you represented, but to know your own values and your own principles as you leave the conference today. I also hope that this week you learned how to listen and develop the ability to see opportunities to forge agreement with the people that hold different positions than you or have entirely different worldviews, even when that means you don't get everything you want, especially when that means you can't get everything that you want. So National Model UN provides an excellent opportunity to learn about how to listen and disagree at the same time. And I encourage you to continue practicing that particular skill in your daily life as you leave the conference. And that's what I wish for you to take from your conference experience this week. And despite the many obstacles that you have faced, maybe this week, maybe in the last year, you were here working for 4 long days when you didn't have to be. You were in huddles where your faculty and staff and student advisors might not have seen all the hard work that you were doing. And I want to say that myself and as a representative of the board, we see all of you and all your hard work this week. And for those who could not make it here for our virtual conference this week, for whatever difficult circumstances they might be facing right now or during the last year, during this pandemic, I want us and I invite you to see them as well. And I ask that all of us invite them back, whether it's next year, the year after, or after their National Model UN experience, for when we might gather in person again. And with that, I will turn it back over to Michael. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tina. It is my distinct pleasure to work year-round with Tina, the rest of the board, advisory group, and our headquarters staff to guarantee the long-term success of NMUN. We're not going to tempt fate by testing the technology to bring them all on the screen now, but let me say thank you to all of you in these groups, especially Paul and Jess, as well as Board President Chrissy Eastep. Over the past few days, most of you have represented the views of an assigned member state. As the delegates representing Oxfam in the simulation will tell you, non-governmental organizations, NGOs, are an essential partner in hoping to achieve the global goals. It is indeed an honor for us to welcome our keynote speaker for this ceremony, the former Foreign Secretary of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and the current president of the International Rescue Committee, David Miliband.
Hi, my name is David Miliband. I'm the President and CEO of the International Rescue Committee. This is an international humanitarian charity which was founded by Albert Einstein in the 1930s to help rescue Jews and intellectuals from Nazi-occupied Europe, and today works around the world in 200 field sites, 40 countries, helping people whose lives are shattered by conflict, and disaster survive, recover, and gain control of their lives. We're also the largest refugee resettlement agency in the United States. Sadly, far fewer refugees being allowed into the United States now than 5 years ago or 25 years ago. But hopefully that number is going up under the current administration. And we work in 25 cities helping some of the most vulnerable people in the world start new lives here. We are a focused charity that deals with the symptoms of political failure around the world, because what is civil war other than political failure? I hope you've had the chance during the session of the Model UN to get a sense of the challenges, the opportunities, the compromises that are sometimes necessary to make political progress. I spent a large part of my career in politics in the United Kingdom. I became Foreign Secretary, Secretary of State for Foreign and Commonwealth Affairs in 2007, and was proud and lucky enough to serve in that role for 3 years. So I'm speaking to you today as someone who's seen politics up close, who's seen the UN and the UN Security Council up close, and today is working at ground level or overseeing an organization, leading an organization that works at ground level to deal with the symptoms of political failure, to try and help people restore dignity and hope to their own lives at a time of enormous trauma. I'm really proud that the Deputy Secretary General of your Model UN, Marleen Schreier, is a valued member of our team in Germany, in IRC Deutschland. And it's her invitation that brings me to you today and to speak to you today. I very much hope you've had intense and worthwhile discussions, because the central challenge that I want to speak to you about today, I think will have run through all of your discussions. That challenge is very simply stated. It's that the world is more connected than ever before, hyper-connected in all sorts of ways. People, countries, communities, cities, joined as never before, joined culturally, joined economically, joined in security terms, in health terms. Haven't we learned that in the course of the COVID pandemic? Joined in all these ways, yet in all sorts of other ways, the world is more divided than ever before. Certainly, maybe not ever before, but certainly more divided than any time since the end of the Cold War in 1990. And in some ways, more fragmented than at any time since the Second World War. That tension between a hyper-connected global commons, a hyper-connected world, and a politically fragmented world runs through the work that the International Rescue Committee does around the world. And I think it will have run through your discussions, whether about climate change or Yemen or the future of global public health. Now, my perspective on this dilemma, the dilemma between hyperconnection on the one hand and fragmentation on the other, is that its symptoms are very clear. They are seen in the inequalities, the insecurities, the instabilities of this phase of globalization. This phase of globalization has been intense. It's spread a market economy at extraordinary speed, but it's also been marked by the fact that global leadership has been lacking. The management of the global commons, the air, the seas, the environment that we hold in common has not been well served. And it's also been notable for a rise in the most extreme forms of violence within countries. Civil wars taking place at an unprecedented rate, and people fleeing from war at an unprecedented rate. 80 million people fleeing from war today, more than 1% of the global population. 35 million of them are refugees, and 45 million, that means they've crossed borders from one country into another, from countries like Syria, from countries like Myanmar. 45 million are internally displaced people. Those are people who've been rendered homeless in their own country as a result of war. These are not economic migrants. These are people who are fleeing for reasons of politics. The kind of issues that I deal with every day are the issues of those displaced people. How can we continue to get medical aid into Syria when there are so many threats and closures of cross-border crossing points? How can we sustain life and livelihood in Yemen, the world's largest humanitarian crisis, when the conflict still seems to rage after 6 misbegotten years, and when all sides to the conflict have been accused by the United Nations of war crimes, and when all sides get in the way of humanitarian aid delivery, which itself is contrary to international humanitarian law. So this phase of globalization is marked by insecurity, by instability, by inequality. And it's worth asking, why is that the case? Because 30 years ago, when I was of an age to attend the model United Nations, there was a feeling that while different countries were moving at different speeds in their development, there was a common destination in accountable government, protection of human rights, and market economics, which protected the poorest while giving incentives for business development. Today, that has been at least in part thrown into reverse, because while the market economy has spread, human rights and accountable government are in retreat. For 15 years, there have been declining numbers of countries classified as democracies by the Economist Intelligence Unit, by the NGO Freedom House, by an excellent project at the University of Gothenburg called the Varieties of Democracy Project. They've all shown what's called democratic recession, the receding of the democratic impulse, the impulse to accountable government. Or at least what has been receding is the state of democracy in different countries. There are plenty of places where democracy is in retreat, but where the people are protesting against it. Now, the question is, why has that happened? And I just want to point to a few reasons why this phase of globalization has been marked by inequality, insecurity, and instability. One is that the spreading of economic power has led to the dispersal of political power. That's how you see gridlock at the United Nations. It's how you see people talk about a G0 world, a leaderless world. It's certainly a world very different from the 1990s, when the US was the single hyperpower. Today, there's a much greater fragmentation of political power around the world. The second reason, I think, is that, in my perspective, the problem with the global institutions that are set up to hold the world to account, that are set up to manage the interconnections between the world, the problem of those institutions is not that they are too strong and overbearing, it's that they are too weak. If you take the example of COVID, I'm sitting on the International Panel on Pandemic Preparedness and Response, which is a World Health Assembly sponsored panel. If you look at the interim report of that panel, which was published in January, what it says quite rightly is, in my view, is that the World Health Organization is not just underfinanced for the job it has, it's underpowered for the job it has. It doesn't have rights of inspection in countries, for example. It's subject to political pressures when science should come to the fore. And that's just one example of an international institution. You can think of climate institutions too. And you can also think about institutions for policing the conduct of war and of peace, because the truth about conflict around the world today is not that it happens between states, it happens within states. And those civil wars are in various ways very uncivil, because the laws of war that protect civilians are marked not by being honored, but by being breached. That's how you end up with 43 children killed in a coach in northern Yemen. It's how you find International Rescue Committee staff, health staff, bombed and killed in an ambulance in northwest Syria. And that leads to the third reason. This isn't a comprehensive list, but it's intended to get you thinking. The third reason for this mismanaged process of globalization is an unresolved debate about national sovereignty and the relationship between the rights of states over their own citizens and the universal rights of citizens. For 300 years, until the end of the Second World War, from the 1640s until the 1940s, the rights of states were recognized in international law, but the rights of citizens were not. And then after 1945, after the Second World War, after the trauma of the war, but also the lessons of the interwar period, individuals, all human beings, whether they lived in communist countries or capitalist countries, whether in democratic countries or autocratic countries, they were given rights in international law, rights of individuals to balance the rights of states. This was a historic move. And what's happened in the last 15 years is that that commitment to the rights of individuals, never honored absolutely, but that commitment has receded. And it's receded in the face of demands that what happens within a nation state are just the matter for that nation state. And that goes to the heart of the dilemma that's raised about the rules-based international order that we're supposed to live in. It's called a rules-based order. Sometimes it's called a liberal international order, not because it's left-wing, but because it had rights for individuals as well as rights for states. It was liberal in the sense that it gave individual rights as well as states' rights. It was international in that all countries were represented, all countries are signatory of the UN Charter, and it was an order because there were international institutions set up to try and police that order. And what's happening today is that the rules of the rules-based order are not being followed. The international part of the rules-based international order is under stress because the institutions are too weak. And the order part is really ironic because there is in too many places disorder, whether on the land or on the seas. And so I hope as you reflect on your time at this model United Nations, at this extraordinary moment in history, when for the first time in 100 years, the world is living through a pandemic, and for the first time in longer, when the world really has come to a common conversation and come to a common stop in various ways, I hope you'll think about what you're going to do over the 30, 40, 50, 60 years ahead of you that will contribute to reestablishing a more rules-based, more international, more ordered international environment. Because if we know anything from the last 30 years, it's that unless we manage the global commons better, much better, then it's truly an existential crisis that the planet and the human race face. And as you think about those responsibilities, I hope that whether you're aiming to go into government, whether you're aiming to go into the private sector, or whether you're aiming to go into NGOs, as I am at the moment, you'll see that you have a particular responsibility. Because in my experience, whether in government or in the NGO sector, real change only happens when you have governments ready to lead, when businesses and organizations innovate, and when people mobilize. And sometimes the governments won't lead. So it's up to the businesses to innovate or for people to mobilize. And I would argue that at a time when governments are in retreat, it's essential for citizens, for the private sector to step up. It's the time when they have to step up and step forward, when it's business partnerships with NGOs that will pioneer new ways of tackling climate change, or new ways of recording abuses of human rights, or new ways of putting pressure on regimes to honor the commitments they've made in their own constitutions and in their signatory to international conventions. The United Nations is an extraordinary institution. I always feel a special buzz when I walk through it, and I never forget the privilege of representing my country in the United Nations Security Council. But with responsibility comes appropriate accountability. And I hope that this will be an age going forward when there's accountability for governments, accountability for the private sector, and accountability for all of us as individuals, individually and collectively. We're accountable for the way we steward our responsibilities to each other. And that's what I hope has come through the discussions and the debate that is so important. Because at a time when the world is fragmenting, or at least the world's nations are fragmenting in the way that they organize and engage with each other, it's especially important that the people of the world engage with each other. And the model UN should be all about engagement. I hope you've enjoyed your engagement, and I'm very grateful to you for listening to me today. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. And while I cannot improve upon that shout out to Marleen, let me humbly add my thanks to both our Deputy Secretary General and to our Secretary General and to the team that they have bridging conferences A and B. You all worked together to keep adapting to a pandemic as we shifted from in-person to hybrid to an all-virtual platform for both training and the conference itself. In my days as a delegate, which are a few decades behind me, I could not have imagined the success we have witnessed online over the past few days, especially since there was no internet when I was at the conference. The college student-aged me basked in the afterglow of the hope embodied by the fall of the Berlin Wall. Yet fires have still burned, ranging from famine and warfare to intolerance, inequity, and inequality. And then this week, add a barge the size of the Empire State Building stuck sideways in the Suez Canal. That certainly would have been rejected from any Model UN crisis simulation as unrealistic. Yet we are all too aware that the pandemic is real. Despite any number of challenges, the Secretariat came together these past months to develop new systems to offer delegates the experience we ourselves received. A sense of empowerment and a renewed energy from these sessions that you can put to work creating a better world. So to the entire Secretariat, my heartfelt thanks. And it's now my pleasure to introduce for her remarks, our Deputy Secretary General, Marleen Schreier.
Thank you, Michael. There are many people that I'm thankful for, not only today, but as Michael just mentioned, there are a few people who deserve special praise in this ceremony. It's first and foremost, I want to thank the entire NMUN Secretariat. A heartfelt thank you for the hard work you have put into the preparation of the conference in a year that was particularly hard for all of us. So thank you to all assistant directors and directors for facilitating committees in such a professional manner, reviewing the work of the body with such diligence, sometimes until late at night, while always keeping spirits up during and also after committee sessions ended. And also thank you to all the Undersecretary Generals for supporting your departments with such dedication. Thank you for being there for each other. Usually we would thank them with applause. So today I dare to speak for everyone on this platform right now if I say thank you. Without you, this conference would not have been possible. This conference would also not have been possible without you, fellow delegates. Thank you for your continuous engagement over the past 4 days. Thank you for your enthusiasm and passion, and for the ingenious ideas you brought to the floor of your committees. I am so impressed with your work this week. You addressed the global pandemic and future dangers of such events through frameworks of preparedness, prevention, data collection, and access to vaccination. You addressed matters of security and emerging crises. You addressed climate change effects on health and on displacement, protecting the most vulnerable among us. You addressed women's empowerment and youth empowerment, advancing education, political participation, access to reproductive health, and strengthening employment. Cooperation stood in the center of many of your solutions, internationally, regionally, South-South cooperation, exchanging and using technology. With technology becoming ever more important, issues such as cybersecurity and digital protection and cybercrime received added attention in your committees. It was great to see all the efforts to merge several ideas and approaches into one document, how you found ways to be inclusive in broadcasts and huddles, and I am impressed by the number of resolutions that were adopted by acclamation in true diplomatic fashion. A total of 77 resolutions, 2 press statements, and 2 presidential statements were adopted across the 22 committees in the past 4 days. And this is a testament to your hard work. At times, emotions ran high in committee and tensions had to be resolved. But being emotional is not a bad thing. Becoming emotional shows that you care, that we care about the work, that we care about the topic, and that we care about the outcome. I like to say emotions are just energy in motion. And that is what we need. We need you to be passionate. We need you to put your motivation and energy to good use. Go out and develop the skills that can eventually influence the directions of families, companies, schools, politics, and many more. And while the spotlight today is rightly on the work that all of you have created, I kindly ask you to indulge me as I want to share a very brief personal story. I started this conference by telling you about my first National Model United Nations experience in 2011. I applied to be a chair back then, right in my first year. Facilitating the work of the committee was great. I loved the experience so much, so I applied to join the NMUN volunteer staff. But I wasn't offered a position. So the next year I came back as a head delegate for my school and participated in committee. And I was glad I got actually to work in working groups and write a resolution. I loved the experience, so I applied again. I applied once, I applied not twice, not even 3 times, even though that would have been favorable for my stylistic build-up here. No, I applied to be an assistant director 4 times. Year over year, I improved on my writing and my speaking skills, came back with my school and supported new students in our association. My applications probably also got more professional. Eventually, I became a member of NMUN Secretariat after proving and improving my skills. And now 7 years later, I have had the great honor to lead you and the wonderful NMUN Secretariat into this conference. I'm not telling you this to deter you from joining the NMUN volunteer staff. Please do. The majority of the team only applied once. I am telling you this because you always hear it is okay to fail, or maybe it is important to fail. But the successful people that tell you that don't seem to have failed. For all you know, they are the DSG of NMUN. Nobody likes to share a story of failure. But these stories are important so you build resilience to overcome the challenges you face now or in the future. Sometimes you need to persevere and try again. Sometimes you still need to develop certain skills that you haven't yet acquired. And sometimes you simply need a bit of luck. But you're on the right track. NMUN is a once-in-a-lifetime experience, even if you come back. You have honed valuable skills such as researching, public speaking, collaborating, negotiating, compromising. And I am rooting for you to apply these successfully in your future careers. Being successful is much easier when you work together. Let yourself be inspired by others and inspire them so that you can move together towards tomorrow. That journey starts with the decisions and actions that you take today, or maybe tomorrow because it's already close to midnight where you are based. Either way, I am hopeful for the future, knowing that everyone present here today is striving to make the world a better place. Last but not least, I want to thank Alfie, not only for being a great counterpart and an even greater Secretary General, but also for being my friend. I couldn't have asked for a better partner in this endeavor, and I am immensely grateful for you, Alfie. And now I have the great pleasure to invite the Honorable Secretary General for his closing remarks.
Thank you, Marleen. Sorry. And thank you for your tireless work and support all through this year. The substantive excellence of this conference owes so much to you. Thank you. Delegates, faculty, advisors, guests, and friends. It feels like only moments ago I was opening our conference. The last few days have been an exhilarating blur, and I've not been getting enough sleep. Just like New York, in fact. Our senior staff are at least spared the challenge of sitting on the main stage of the UN throughout the entire ceremony, under warm lights, trying not to let their eyes close as they sit down for the first time in days. I have watched many NMUN Secretaries General give this closing speech, and I remain baffled as to how they found any time to write it. I want to start by thanking you, the delegates, from the bottom of my heart. Your dedication and commitment this week has been magnificent. Thank you for bringing energy and sincerity to your approach in the last days. Thank you for showing patience and flexibility as we navigated through our first fully virtual conference together. Thank you for showing kindness to one another, even when you were tired or stressed or emotions were running high. We even managed to successfully navigate our conference platform briefly going down entirely yesterday lunchtime. It was shortly after this issue was fixed that I mostly stopped worrying about anything at all. If our staff and our delegates can cope with what I considered to be the nightmare scenario, then we can cope with anything. I should relax a little more. At this juncture, I would like to thank Gatherly, who have worked closely with us to bring this conference to life. NMUN is a large institution with a history going back 100 years. We have a board, a headquarters, a small army of volunteer staffers, and thousands of student participants. We can be a demanding partner to work with. I'm coming away from this conference delighted with the experience we were able to offer delegates. At the start of the conference, I challenged you to ask difficult questions of yourselves or your peers and of the assumptions you have. Wandering around the space in the last few days, I've seen plenty of evidence of this. In your speeches, in your huddles, in your resolutions, and in your interactions with each other and our volunteer staff, in the way you have risen to new and unfamiliar tasks and challenges. I am proud of what you were able to achieve in just a few short days, and you should be proud of yourselves too. Our theme this year is Together Towards Tomorrow. I have seen togetherness, clarity of purpose, and determination to achieve common goals. I'd also like to thank, again, our volunteer staff. If we were in New York, I would ask them to stand up at this point and soak up some well-deserved applause. They earned it. They are and will always be an inspiration to me. I am sure that you've learned valuable lessons about leadership from them. One aspect of our theme that I touched on in my opening remarks was institutional renewal. This applies just as much to the National Model United Nations as any other institution. I have had the pleasure of serving as a volunteer staffer for 8 years. Having the opportunity to serve as Secretary General is one of the greatest honors of my life. This conference will be my last, and that is a difficult truth to face up to. I'm going to have a lot of time on my hands. But this conference is in really good hands. I see experienced senior staffers more than ready to step up. I see experienced directors ready to leave substantive and logistical departments. I see brand new directors and assistant directors full of passion and energy who will have long and successful journeys with NMUN. And I see you, our conference delegates, ready to take your own journey with this conference to the next level and join the volunteer staff. At this point, I will make a shameless plug. If you've enjoyed your time at this conference and want to keep coming back, apply to join volunteer staff. The applications will be available on the NMUN website shortly after Week B finishes. You will learn so much about yourself, about the institutions of the United Nations, about leadership, and you'll make friends that you will keep for the rest of your life. Thank you again, all of you, delegates and staff, for your work this week and all through the year. I will now reintroduce Michael Eaton to share updates on future conferences and for the announcement of the Delegation Awards.
Thank you, Alfie. And thank you for the privilege of working with both you and Marleen. The current vaccination projections suggest reasons for optimism for coming together in person in the next academic year. In the United States, NMUN offers annual simulations in Washington, D.C., November of 21, and in New York in April of 2022. And in fall of 2022, a return to Japan. Information on these conferences is available at nmun.org. Note, a final decision about our Czech Republic conference will be made in mid-May. The big news for our return to New York is that we will be at a single hotel venue, the New York Hilton. Extending a video welcome back is Kelly Cahill, a member of the executive management team at the hotel. Let's watch.
Good afternoon, and on behalf of the team at the New York Hilton and our friends at Model UN, we wanted to welcome you to your 2021 convention. While we're sad that you're not here in this ballroom, we can't wait to welcome you back in 2022. Have a wonderful conference, enjoy, and look forward to having you back here in New York in 2022.
I think as amazing as this has been, we all welcome the opportunity to come back together in person as well. And now we're at the time in the ceremony where we announce the awards, and you get to watch me struggle with opening the PowerPoint on my screen. And Alfie will hopefully nod at me if I was successful. You see it on your end? Okay, well, thank you, Marleen.
I'm nodding.
When Alfie did not. We urge all delegates and their faculty advisors to maintain an appropriate perspective regarding the awards, because the fundamental basis of the simulation is cooperation and collaboration among nations, which includes working together through multilateral diplomacy. As it says on the slide, no one can observe every action in committee or truly judge an individual's learning and growth. We do offer individual recognition, which I've totally misspelled. Am I allowed to correct things on screen? We'll just pretend that didn't happen. I think we're all tired. We've admitted that. The individual recognition takes the place of the outstanding position papers that are selected by committee staff, as well as the outstanding delegates in committee awards, which are voted on by peer delegates in each committee. Those have been announced in the final committee sessions, and the three of us on screen offer our congratulations for your hard work that's been recognized by the Secretariat and by your peers. NMUN also offers Delegation Awards in 3 categories. The criteria and methodology are outlined on our websites, and the recipients will be posted after the ceremony in alphabetical order. In the coming days, we will send out to these recipients electronic certificates as well. The honorable mention delegations, I'm not going to read individually, but I'll leave this on the screen for a couple of moments. We offer our congratulations, as we would normally do in person, to everyone represented here for the hard work of all members of the delegation, recognized for their consistent excellence across various committees. The second category of awards are the distinguished delegations. And again, we are grateful to all of your work in committee, but through the observations of the Secretariat members, recognize these schools for their distinguished work across the simulation. Finally, we have the outstanding delegations, and with the few minutes we have remaining, wanted to one by one list these individuals for the recognition of achievement that comes with needing to be excellent across so many of the committees. The outstanding delegations are Alma College, representing Kenya and Nigeria. Baylor University, representing Malaysia. Bishop's University, representing Ireland. Brigham Young University, representing Italy. The Chemnitz University of Technology, representing Angola. Oh, my apologies for the pronunciation. Collège de Bois de Boulogne, representing Thailand. Florida Atlantic University, representing the Dominican Republic and Germany. Jointly representing Sweden, Japan Model United Nations, and Riverside City College. The Ludwig Maximilians University Munich delegation representing Indonesia. Macalester College, representing Zimbabwe, Kofi Annan's alma mater. McEwen University, representing Vietnam. Manhattan College, representing Iraq. Midwestern State University, representing the Bahamas. The Model UN of the Russian Far East, representing Estonia. Seton Hill University, representing Singapore. Universidad Católica Andrés Bello, representing Iceland. Université de Sherbrooke, Faculty of Law, representing the Czech Republic. Université Laval, representing Pakistan. The University of Montana, representing Kazakhstan. And Wright State University, representing the United Kingdom. To all delegations, we offer a thank you for your hard work and commitment. It helps make NMUN a success. And I would also like to recognize my favorite award, which is printed on pages 22 and 23 of the program. It's probably too small to see on your screen, but you can view it there. And it's the recognition of the schools who have come for 10, 20, 30, 40, and 50 years to National Model United Nations, being part of a tradition of excellence. As Tina Zappilli mentioned, there are those who were not able to attend our virtual conference, and we look forward equally to welcoming back them next year as they continue to build on their tradition. So soon, we will start to plan NMUN New York 2022. We invite you, I know you can't click on the link on your screen, but it's not that hard to remember, and we will send it out as well, to take our survey about the conference, and also, as has already been said a couple of times, apply for the volunteer staff. And now it's my pleasure to reintroduce Alfie Jones, our Secretary General, to adjourn the conference. Alfie.
Thank you very much, Michael. So, with all of that being said, are there any points or motions on the floor at this time?
Honorable Secretary General, I move to adjourn the meeting until 2022.
This motion is in order. We will move to adopt this motion by acclamation. Is there any dissent? Seeing none, I hereby declare the National Model United Nations adjourned until 2022. If you can, let's be transparent with everyone. I'm trying to end the broadcast and it won't turn off. So